So good morning. We're here now for the, I think, fifth lesson in our home. And we're going to finish our study in the chapter of Daniel today. We're going to get the last two chapters, chapter 11 and chapter 12. And there's quite a lot of reading. Chapter 11 is rather long. It's also rather difficult to follow. It's not unlike a dream that you might have. And I'm not saying you would dream these particular things, but at least in dreams that I have, that I remember, they jump around. They don't go in a straight line or chronologically or anything such as that. And Daniel's dream didn't either. Let me point out, we'll start very quickly this morning without a lot of preliminary conversation. And in chapter 11, he says, also, verse 1, I, in the first year of Darius the Mede. Well, the last time he was in the first year of Darius the Mede was chapter 9. And we had, of course, chapter 10 after that, which was at a different time. Well, in chapter 9, in the first year of the reign of Darius the Mede, it's when Daniel felt an overwhelming, I'm going to say, need to confess to God on behalf of all of his countrymen, the Jewish people who were in captivity, to confess to him, to God, their sins, and to repent, if you will. Well, then, at the end of his prayer, you have to go back and look at chapter 9. I'm doing a little bit of a review here. But you go back to chapter 9, and the thing that we take most out of chapter 9 is his vision of 70 weeks. And then at the conclusion of that, it doesn't really indicate that he concluded his dream or his vision. But we have chapter 10 in between there, which I read last week and commented on, talked about. And then we get to chapter 11, and it's going back to the first year of Darius the Mede in his kingship. And it's sort of a continuation of the dream that Daniel had back then. So we'll see how it comes out here. But basically what it amounts to is it's talking about this period of time right in here when Daniel had the dream of all of Nebuchadnezzar's statue and the different kings that would be in place. We get an indication today in chapter 11 of the Maccabean period, in which for a little bit of time, the Jews were in control again during the period of the Maccabees. Now, a Protestant Bible typically calls calls it the silent years, and it doesn't have anything much after the captivity until the time of the New Testament. But in other Bibles, there are chapters, and again, I didn't go back and look it up, but last week I mentioned 3 or 4. I'm not sure how many books of the Maccabees that were written, but it covers the history of this time period in which the Jewish people were able to revolt under the leadership of Judas Maccabee and overthrow Greece. But it was only for this little period in here, and then the Roman army came and invaded. The Roman army was too great of a force. And that's what today's dream really is about, or covers, when Rome became the ruler over what the Scripture describes as the pleasant land, and that's meaning Israel, of course. I want to also point out that these stripes across this chart were not, they weren't necessarily cut off as clearly as the yellow is from the gray, or the gray is from the brown, or the brown is from the dark colored gray or black here. These lines across here were not straight. They wobbled in different parts of the country. So it's hard to be precise, and I'm not trying to be precise for you. I just want you to know that today's lesson has to do with the Maccabeans revolting. Maccabeans were Jewish people, and they revolted against the Greek that had conquered them briefly by conquering Medo-Persia and also Babylonia. The Medo-Persians had captured down here, but the Greeks came along, and they became the ruling force. And then there was the Maccabees, that for this brief period, whether it wobbled in here or not, is hard to say. But there are given some times here that this was 167 before Christ, and this was 63 before Christ. So there was roughly 100 years in here where the Jewish people had freedom in their pleasant land. And then along came Rome. And that's much of what the rest of Daniel's vision that's included in chapter 11. It's a little hard to follow. Again, I say, unless you have a pen or paper, you sit down with it and you try to keep track here. But it talks about the king of the north and the king of the south. The south is talking about the Maccabeans in this particular area, but Greece had control of all of the rest of the territory around the Pleasant Land. So the Pleasant Land was just tiny and by itself here, controlled by the Maccabees. And then came the Roman army, which is referred to as the king of the south. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Rome is the king of the north. It comes from way over yonder, comes down this way, and around the Mediterranean Sea, to not just the Pleasant Land, but all the territories surrounding it. And it's, again, I say, a little hard to follow, because different kings in there make alliances one with another. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. They win some battles and they lose some battles. That's why I'm saying that the time specifics are a little wavy here, because it depends on where you are in the territory at the time. Anyway, let's read on. I'm not going to spend a lot of time commenting on chapter 11. I say that, and I hope I can keep from it at this point. But I think I've set it up for you so that you know what we're talking about. Is that there's a king from the north, which is Rome, and that king eventually prevails. And we know, for instance, that when Jesus was on earth in a fleshly body, that the Roman army ruled in the Pleasant Land. But not only the Pleasant Land, but all the territory for what was the known world at the time. So we're still in the first year of Darius, the king of the Medes, starting chapter 11. And we're not really in that time. Daniel wrote this later. If you remember, he wrote things down, but he says nobody understood it, which means that he didn't tell anybody. So here's the way it worked out. It says, also I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and to strengthen him. Said he was backing up Darius. And then it turned out, and I didn't intend to get off into what I'm fixing to say now, but just as a reminder to you, Darius is the king who put Daniel in the lion's den because he passed an edict that the people who wouldn't bow down to the image that he had prepared would get thrown into the lion's den. And Darius is the person who did that, even though Daniel was strengthening him and standing behind him. But now he's going to show in verse 2, now will I show thee the truth. And he's continuing on in his dream or his vision here. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. Now, that's talking about the king of Rome. And we know them by a different word. We call them Caesars. And when I say we call them, I don't think we originated that. I think that's what title they gave to their leader. And verse 3 says, and a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. He's going to do whatever he wants to do. That's what ruling or doing according to his will means. Verse 4, and when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and it shall be divided toward the four winds of heaven, and not to his posterity. That means not to his kids. Now, we know that the kingdom went on for quite a while. I don't know the time, but there was more than one Caesar. Now, nor, I'm sorry, in the middle I said now, I should have said nor, according to his dominion which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others beside those. New paragraph. And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes shall be strong. I added that part, didn't say that. And he shall be strong above him, and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. And in the end of years, they shall join themselves together. And the reason they're joining themselves together is because one of them's daughter went and married up, I think, with the other one. It doesn't say that exactly. But here's what it says in verse 6. And in the end of years they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand, nor his arm. Now, arm could be, we could add a Y to each of those and call those armies. That's where their strength was. But she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times. But out of a branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army. See, there they add the Y to the word arm. And it says, they shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against them, and shall prevail. So, what it's saying, that prevailing is saying that the armies that were fighting against Rome won a few battles, won some battles. And this was a battle that they prevailed in. But they didn't win a war. The war was won by the Romans, and the Romans then came into rulership. Verse 8, and shall also carry captives into Egypt, their gods with their princes. So they're gonna. If you remember when I had a map up here showing Jerusalem and Babylon, and we're going back in years now in Nebuchadnezzar's time. But when Nebuchadnezzar pillaged the temple of Israel's God, he brought his God, so to speak, with him. He didn't remember bring his God because Israel's God is a spirit. But they took all of the utensils out of the temple and brought them with them. Now, in this case, because they are idol worshippers, they really had idols. They really had gods. They had images of, stone and wood, a variety of names that they had. They also had invisible gods that they when I say invisible, they just imagined them. The principal god that existed during this time for all of the idolatrous countries went by a variety of names, but we typically, and we combine all of those names into Molech, M-O-L-E-C-H, I think it is, Molech. And Molech, the principal thing about him was that he was a god of fire, and he required them to throw, not all of, but some of their children into the fire. That's what the main thing that these idolatrous gods were known for. Our God was known for love and peace, and from a spiritual standpoint, you can feel it inside, and you have a feel for these people who worshipped idol gods and invisible gods and Molech, if you will, and worshipped him with fire and by throwing their children in the fire. Now, it doesn't say that in Daniel's dream here. I don't want you to be looking for that, but elsewhere in Scripture, we find a confirmation of that sort of thing. So let's go back and begin with verse 8. It says, "And shall also carry captives into Egypt their gods, with their princes, and with their precious vessels of silver and of gold. And he shall continue more years than the king of the north." See, that gives an indication that these stripes are not exactly straight because they're all of the same size here. But Rome was not in control for as long as was the other king before him. Verse 9. "So the king of the south shall come into his kingdom, and then return into his own land." Verse 10, "But his sons shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through. Then shall he return and be stirred up even to his fortress." That's just saying that there's a band of marauders who go out and capture a portion of territory, but it's nowhere near the whole territory that the Roman Empire came up or came to be. But before it established its power completely in that entire empire, the king of the south was able to come up and stir up trouble. Verse 11, "And the king of the south shall be moved with choler." Now, we saw that word a lesson or two ago, and it just means anger. So the king of the south shall be moved with anger, and shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north. And he shall set forth a great multitude but the multitude shall be given into his hand. And when he has taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down many 10,000s, but he shall not be strengthened by it. He's going to be strong enough to win and to cast down many 10,000s, but that's not going to make him any stronger. And the point seems to be there that even in war, when there's a winning army, that they have casualties, that their strength is reduced by a war even that they win. Verse 13, for the king of the north shall return and shall set forth a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come after certain years with a great army and with much riches. And in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south, also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall. So the king of the north shall come and cast up a mount and take the most fenced cities, and the arms, or the armies of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people. So here's an indication that included in the conquest of Rome is the Israeli people who were led by the Maccabees at the time. And even his chosen people shall not withstand, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him. And he shall stand in the glorious land. Now, the glorious land is Israel. It's the Holy Land. It's the way Daniel has referred to it as the pleasant land and as the glorious land. And there's none that's going to be able to stand against him in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed. So Daniel is having this vision 500 and some odd years before the time of Christ. And according to my little chart here, Rome captured it and came into rule 63 years before that. So that's the timing that we're talking about, that Daniel had this dream concerning it. Verse 17, he shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and the upright ones with him. Thus shall he do. And he shall give him the daughter of women, corrupting her. But she shall not stand on his side, neither be for him. Basically, that's a little reference, and it's hard to see that until we get to the New Testament. When we get to the New Testament, we see that the Romans have absolute rule over the pleasant land, the glorious land. And yet, the Jews are allowed to have their own government, their own worship. They have their temple. They go and offer sacrifices. They do all the things that that they had done before. It's just that they don't have the freedom of running the country. Verse 18, after this shall he turn his face unto the isles, and shall take many, but a prince for his own behalf shall cause the reproach offered by him to cease. And without his own approach, he shall cause it to turn upon him. So that particular verse apparently means he went out into the Mediterranean Sea to capture islands that they hadn't captured before, and they apparently had some difficulty in making that stick. Verse 19. Then he shall turn his face toward the fort of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and not be found. Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom. Well, we've all heard about tax collectors, and they in the New Testament. Perhaps Matthew is the most famous, if not he, then Zacchaeus was a tax collector, collected taxes for the Romans. The middle of verse 20. But within few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. And in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in pleasantly or peaceably, and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. And with the armies or arms of a flood shall they be overthrown from before him, and shall be broken. Yeah, also the prince of the covenant. And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people. He shall enter peaceably, even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey, and spoil and riches. Yeah. And he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time. And he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army. But he shall not stand, for they shall forecast devices against him. Yeah, they that feed of the portion of his meat shall destroy him. Let me read that a little different tense. Yeah, they that feed of the portion of his meat shall destroy him. And that means that there's going to be some kind of mutiny, some revolt. And his army shall overflow, and many shall fall down slain. And both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper, for yet the end be at the time appointed. Here his dream starts talking about, I think, the end as we're expecting it to be someday. We don't know when that is. There's still a little more of his dream much earlier than that, until we get to, I think, verse 35 or something like that. I don't know. We'll get there in a minute. Well, longer than a minute. Verse 28. Then shall he return into his land with great riches, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploits, and return to his own land. At the time appointed, he shall return and come toward the south, but it shall not be as the former, or as the latter. For the ships of Chittim shall come against him. This is a new paragraph. Therefore he shall be grieved and return and have indignation against the holy covenant. So shall he do. He shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. I think this is sort of like what we hear about in our own government, that there's several intelligence agencies, the FBI and the CIA and the Secret Service, and I don't know what departments of intelligence that there are all around the world feeding information to our administration so that we can make appropriate decisions to protect ourselves. But this is what I get. This is the way that it comes through with me when I read it. Verse 31 says, and the arms or armies shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolation. And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries, but the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. This probably on this chart is in this area, and talking about what my understanding is called Antioch Epiphanes, otherwise how do you say it, Tom?
Antiochus Epiphanes.
Antiochus Epiphanes.
I believe this whole chapter is about, well, or at least from 19. And
yeah.
The Assembly of God doctrine most certainly is not what you're preaching today.
Yeah.
Their doctrine is, well, in most churches' doctrine is this is mostly about Egypt and Syria. So you don't really see that. So once again, this is Syria, and Antiochus Epiphanes is the one that took away the sacrifices.
Well,
he's the one that went against the holy people. But
well,
I'm not trying to cause confusion here.
No, I'm
just saying that what if you read in Maccabees, that's what this really almost follows perfectly with Maccabees.
And what I'm saying is that within these groups of of ruling parties. There are revolts in different parts of their territory. And you mentioned Syria is one of those, and Egypt is another one of those.
Well, that's usually, I'm just saying what the Assembly of God doctrine is. The Assembly of God doctrine says that the king of the north is Syria, and the king of the south is Egypt. So I'm not saying you're wrong or whatever. I'm just saying what their doctrine is.
Yeah.
And you find that in the booklet too. And that's the way I've always heard it, and that's the way it lines up to the book of Maccabees. I recommend everybody go read at least the first couple chapters of Maccabees. Because you start to find out, because this is a big thing to the Jews. Not so much to us, but the Jews, this is huge.
Yeah.
Because Maccabees, which was just a nickname for Judas Maccabeus. His nickname was Maccabeus. His name is Judas.
Yeah.
But his father was Matthias. And Matthias had 5 sons.
Yeah.
And Judas Maccabeus was in the middle. Well, anyways, when Matthias died, Matthias was he was a priest. And Antiochus Epiphanes made it a law for everyone to sacrifice. All over the whole Jewish realm, all over Israel. And anyways, Matthias went up against it, and he wouldn't do it. And one of the other Jews went and did this. This is out in the streets. They had this all over. And finally, Matthias killed the other Jew for making a sacrifice, pig or whatever. And then after that, then he started the revolt, which is basically what saved, or what most Jewish believe, saved Israel. Without the Maccabean revolt, they call it the Maccabean revolt only because that was his nickname, Maccabeus, which some people think it means a hammer. Well, not some people think. For sure, Maccabeus means a hammer. And sometimes they say, well, that's because he came down so hard on him, like a hammer. But some people actually believe it's because of the shape of his head. He's shaped like a hammer. But anyways, that was the big thing that if you read the book of Maccabees, it tells you all that history. Now, you don't have to read a lot of it, but Antiochus Epiphanes was the most evil man of his day. He was the most hated person by Jews, more so even than Hitler. He forced them to do horrible things. If they circumcised their children, he would kill their children and hang it around the woman's neck. He did horrible things. He was the Antichrist of his day to the Jews. And he did a lot of bad stuff. And you can read all about that in Maccabees. You don't have to read a lot of it. You could go, if you go online and you just type in, read Maccabees, it'll come up on Bible Hub or Bible Gateway or whatever, and you can read it there. You don't have to read a lot of it, and you just get a feel for this madman, which that's they actually said about him.
And all I'm saying, and I'll repeat it again to some degree what I said earlier, that I'm trying to keep it simple. And
all I was saying is that the typical doctrine of the Assembly of God is that this was about the Seleucid dynasty and the Ptolemy dynasty.
Yeah.
The Ptolemy dynasty is the Egypt to the south.
All right.
And the Seleucid dynasty was of the kingdom of the north, which was the Syrian dynasty.
Okay. So, but none of those things are on our little chart. Is the unfortunate part, and so I'm trying to.
It would be in between the Greeks, because right at the very first of the chapter, he starts talking about Alexander the Great, which is in verse 3, and then so that would be Greece. But then it broke up into 4 kingdoms.
Yep.
After
we studied that last week.
Yeah, because it broke up, and 2 of those kingdoms that it broke up into were Egypt and Syria.
But what I'm trying to get to just briefly, because all of those things are not in here on our chart, I just want to get down to where Rome is the ultimate king of the north.
Well, see, that's where in chapter 30, that would be, or in verse 30, excuse me, that would be Rome jumping into the equation there. And that was... and that was going up against Antiochus Epiphanes. And that would be the ships from Shittim, which would be Rome.
Okay. And so we,
I'm sorry that I took so much time.
no, but your comments.
I was just trying to try to help the people who are trying to follow along in the booklet as why that doesn't really follow with what you're saying, because you're kind of teaching a different doctrine than what they would teach.
I'm trying to simplify it because of the length of it and to read the whole thing and get to the ultimate ruler of the pleasant land, the glorious land, which is Rome.
Yeah,
And I mentioned all of the different places, different parts of the territories where there would be skirmishes and where there would be revolts and where there would be problems. But eventually Rome came and overtook all of those. And so I was reading into the verses that I've already read, the fact that we end up with just Rome at the bottom or at the end. And let me read 31 again. For the arms or the armies shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolation. In verse 32, and such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries, but the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. Now, I want to use that verse 32, to talk to my friends and say, here's the whole point of your life today is to know your God and be able to be strong when these kinds of events come in what we expect to be the end time. Now, there, of course, is, as Tom keeps talking about, the Assembly of God doctrine, which is the pre-tribulation rapture, and we're gone. But what if that's wrong? What if? What if that's wrong? We've got to be strong. Verse 33, and they that understand among the people shall instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword and by flame, by captivity and by spoil many days. Now, when they shall fall, they shall be holpen, that's helped, they shall be holpen with a little help. But many shall cleave to them with flatteries. And that's one of the enemy's favorite weapons, is flattery, is to flatter and cause us to think we are something, that builds up pride in us, when the Spirit of the Almighty God is working hard for us to be humble and have humility instead. In verse 35, and some of them of understanding shall fall. That's there. It's saying that even if you're strong, some that are strong are going to get caught in a flattery and shall fall. It says to try them and to purge and to make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed. And the king shall do according to his will. The king's going to do whatever he wants to do according to his will. And he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished. For that he is determined, for that he is determined shall be done. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above all. But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces, and a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver, and with precious stones and pleasant things. Thus shall he do in the most strong holds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him, like a whirlwind with chariots, and with horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. Now, here's where in verse 40 it talks about the king of the north with many ships, going back to things that Tom said, and I've summarized the stuff that we've read so far, 40 chapters, to get to the point to where Rome shows up with many ships. The king of the north, it says, verse 40, let's read it again. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, but the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen, and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. Verse 41. He shall enter also into the glorious land. So there he is, Rome, entering into the glorious land, which we know to be the way Daniel describes his homeland. And many countries shall be overthrown. That includes Syria and Egypt. It includes many others besides that. But again, I say, for the limited time that we had here, I was trying to condense this all and not be precise. I mentioned that to just get down to where Rome is in charge as we finish our study of the book of Daniel. Verse 41, let me read again, starting at the beginning. He shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown. But these shall escape out of his hand. And here I'll show you on the map. I will show you on the map. But these shall escape out of his hand even Edom and Moab and the chief of the children of Ammon. Now I got this little map of the Holy Land here, and here are these three mentioned: Ammon and Moab and Edom. Now, Ammon, you might recall from a study that we had a few months ago, Ammon and Moab were children of Lot, whose mothers were Lot's daughters. But nonetheless, Ammon and Moab came from Lot, which there was some conflict between Lot's shepherds and Abraham's shepherds that were over here, and the country of Israel kind of follows this. I'm starting from the bottom, go to the top, but this line is the Jordan River Valley that comes up here, and then this is not the Jordan River, but some river goes over here, and that forms the boundary between Israel and Lebanon, and then this is all Israel. Well, across the Jordan River, we find where Lot chose to come this direction when he and Abraham had their agreement. And the children of Ammon are in the upper part, Moab in the middle, and then there's Edom. Now, Edom was a name given to Esau way back when Jacob bought the birthright from Esau. His name was changed to Edom at that time, or I don't know if his name actually was changed, but his territory that he occupied became Edom, and it means red, which historians tell us, or Bible scholars tell us, that it has something to do with the pottage that he sold or that he bought from Jacob in exchange for his birthright. But anyway, these three territories, which don't amount to a lot, they're in the modern country of Jordan, and it's basically a wasteland. Now, the closer you get to the river, the more civilized it is. But the further east that you come, Jordan becomes a desert country. But I just wanted to give you that little indication of what he was talking, what Daniel was talking about in his dream here. Let's go back to to verse 41 and read that again. It says, "He shall enter also into the glorious land." That's on that side of the river. And many countries shall be overthrown. But these three on this side of the glorious land shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab and the chief of the children of Ammon. He shall stretch forth, verse 42, his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasuries of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. And the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. Now, they're not on that map over there. The Libyans are further east. Ethiopians are south of Egypt into the continent of Africa. Verse 44, but tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to make away many. Verse 45, and he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Now, the glorious holy mountain, again, is another word for, or another phrase for, basically for Jerusalem. Jerusalem is mountainous or hilly. At the time that Daniel was writing this, they were some of the biggest mountains he had seen. He had not ever seen mountains like the Himalayas or the Rockies or whatever. So he's referring to the hills that Jerusalem was built on as these glorious holy mountains. Chapter 12. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to find that same time. Even to that same time. I don't know where I put the word find in there. Let me read it again, starting at the beginning. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. He seems to be talking about holy times here, heavenly times, and a heavenly book, because there's nobody keeping track of a membership roll or something like that. Now, we do in our church, and other churches keep track of membership rolls. We keep track of names. But at this particular time, I don't think that was being done for all of the people that had their names written in the book. So it's a clue that we have that he's talking about a book of what nowadays we refer to as the book of life. Verse 2 says, and many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. That verse presents a mystery, at least to me, because at the very beginning of verse 2, it says, and many of them that sleep. Well, I wonder what about the rest of them that sleep? I don't know why it was written the way it was written. But many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. In other words, be resurrected. And we believe in the resurrection, bodily resurrection. Some, middle of verse 2, to everlasting life, and we believe that all of our friends who have died before us and been buried, that they are included in this. And some to shame and everlasting contempt. And we don't know who they were. They weren't our friends. Verse 3, and they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. Ooh. Read that again. Verse 3. And they that be wise. Seems to be some advantage to being wise. We shall shine, the wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament. And they that turn many to righteousness. Okay, turning many to righteousness would indicate evangelism, would indicate that you're testifying to somebody and getting them to change their ways, if you will, and their beliefs to righteousness. And they will shine, the ones who do that will shine as the stars forever and ever. But thou, O Daniel, verse 4, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Now, there again, it's telling Daniel to write down these things, but then shut up the book. Close the book. Don't be sharing all of the things that you have written. And now somebody has discovered, somebody a bunch of years ago, long before I came along, they discovered Daniel's writings, and so they have written them. But it includes instructions to Daniel to shut up the book, seal the book, even to the time of the end. The indication there is, and I kind of play with it a little, but the indication is that at the time of the end, or near the time of the end, it's okay to open up the book and read to see what God told him. What he told him was, many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Well, except for the coronavirus and the stay-at-home orders and all those kinds of things, there's many out there running to and fro. And even with the coronavirus, knowledge is being increased, the research and all of that sort of thing that's going on. And I wouldn't pretend to know anything even close to or knowing all of what they know and what's going on there by these experts, okay? But knowledge is being increased. Concludes a paragraph and starts a new one with verse 5. Then I, Daniel, looked, And behold, there stood other two. Now, the other two he's talking about is other than the fellow who was talking to him by himself. And in this particular case, if you go back and look at chapter 12, verse 1 of chapter 12, it says, and at that time Michael, stand up. Michael. So there was another two in verse 5. It says the one was on this side of the bank of the river, and the other on that side of the bank of the river. And the indication is, and we'll see it, is that Michael must have been standing on the water out in the middle of the river. Verse 6. And one of these guys standing on one side of the river said to the man clothed in linen, that would be Michael, I think, which was upon the waters of the river. There you get the indication that the one clothed in linen was out on the waters of the river. And one of these on the side of the river said to the one out in the middle of the river, how long shall it be to the end of these wonders? And I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever, that it shall be for a time, times and a half. And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. There's an indication that there will be time, that's 1 year, times is 2 more years and a half, 3.5 years worth of tribulation. And of course, our doctrine, our teachings is that we won't be here anyway, we'll be raptured. But what if we're wrong? We need to be strong in the Lord. Going back to an earlier verse that I made reference to when I was reading chapter 11. Verse 8. And I heard, but I understood not. Then said I, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? I guess Daniel was talking in his sleep. I don't know any better way to say that. But in his dream, he was actually participating, and he was communicating with not just the man in linen or the men on either side of the river, but to his Lord as well. Verse 9. And the Lord said, go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. So again, there's an indication that, yeah, Daniel wrote all of his dreams down, but God didn't want to explain to him what it was exactly that was going to happen. Now, we, or at least it's my observation, nobody really understands prophecy in the Scripture. And I can attest to that by the many books that I have read by holy men of seminaries with degrees and letters behind their name this long, and they don't all agree on what the prophecy is going to be, and so therefore I conclude that nobody really understands. I can't tell for sure which one of those is right. Verse 10, many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand. But the wise shall understand. That goes back to an earlier verse that I read where I said it seems that the wise have an advantage. Here the unwise do not understand, or the wicked shall not understand. But the wise shall understand. And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. That's 3.5 years. Now, let me tell you that a couple of times earlier, meaning lessons earlier, from memory, I said 1,260 days. Obviously, my memory was not accurate because it's 1,290 days, and that doesn't work out to exactly 42 30-day months. 1,260 days does that. And when you try to see how many years this is, it works out to like works out to 377 days is 3.5 years.
It's an extra month, I think.
Excuse me?
It's an extra month.
Well, and the Jewish calendar, the way they work, as I understand it, different than the way we have leap years. They have 30-day months for 12 years, and then the 13th year they have 13 30-day months instead of 12 30-day months. So there's no telling for sure what was intended.
Like you said, 1260 would be with 30-day months.
Yeah.
That'd be 3.5 years exactly.
Yeah.
And then they right here, this is adding another month, another 30-day month.
Yeah.
But that's the way they would do a 30-day, and then they did like a leap. They had a leap year where they took a month off or something like that.
Yeah.
7 years or something.
There's no telling. But here we get another twist in verse 12. It says, blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the 1,305 and 30 days. So there's an extra 45 days added to the 1,290. It's 1,335. And there's a lot of speculation as to what that's talking about there, but it's basically, and again, I'm going to summarize and keep it as brief as I can, but the Antichrist, as we know him to, or has been described to us, that's going to be ruling someday, will rule for 3.5 years. And then it'll take 45 days after that for us to get the government reorganized into a government controlled by Jesus. Whether that's accurate or not, I do not know. Verse 13 says, "But go thy way. Go thou thy way, Daniel, till the end be, for thou shalt rest." Now, rest here to Daniel, it means he's going to die and he's going to be among those in the dust. "But go thou thy way till the end be, for thou shalt rest. And then you'll stand in your lot at the end of the days." So when the end of days or the last day comes, then Daniel will stand in his lot. He'll stand with the group. He'll stand with the committee, whatever, that he has been appointed to by the Almighty God. Next week, we start the book of Galatians, and we have 7 lessons, I think, in the book of Galatians. So we'll go back to the New Testament and to Paul's writing. Did you have anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, this is the 100th episode today, so we need to at least mention that once. This is the 100th, number 100 even, so that's a good thing.
That is a good thing. Last week I mentioned that it was the 99th one, but it was the beginning of our 3rd year. So we've done it for 2 years, and now we're up to having 100.
This is probably these chapters and everything. There's so many people, like you're saying, everyone sees it. There's so many different opinions on it. Very hard to, I find it strange that, like, I agreed with the Assembly God doctrine up to about verse 36, and then I kind of, after that, then I kind of agreed with your doctrine until we got to chapter 12 at the very end. Then you went back to the Assembly God doctrine, and I don't believe that. So it's just it's a weird thing that there's just so, like you said, the more opinions you hear about these things, the more you find that people really don't know what this is talking about.
Well,
it's very difficult to predict what these things are talking about.
Well, for me,
especially chapter 12.
As being responsible for teaching, it's extremely difficult to teach.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Well, yeah, you really, like I said, until you got to chapter 12, verse 36, chapter 11, you started to go into the Assembly of God doctrine. Then when you got to chapter 12, you abandoned theirs, and then at the very end of it, you went back to theirs. So it's, but a little bit, not really though, because you're a little bit different from them. So I know it's hard for you to teach this because your doctrine varies from theirs, and but it's amazing how.
Well,
the more
now you're giving them ammunition to say I'm weird.
No, I'm saying I'm more weird than you. That's all I'm saying. That the doctrines that like, let's say just for instance, you're probably closer to them than what I would say in part because you talk about Antichrist, where I don't believe there is such a thing. So I don't see anything in the doctrine that they're talking about an Antichrist. But you agree with the Assembly of God doctrine that there's an Antichrist, where to me I don't find that in chapter 12 at all. There's no mention of an Antichrist. But I'm not saying that you're wrong or they're wrong. I'm not dogmatic about it. I don't find that there's any dead set thing. As long as, like you said, it's a good idea for people to be ready.
The mention of it is just that the general expectation is that there is such a thing. Now, having said that, I don't know how it's all going to come about. I know that someday there will be an end of time as we know it. And when that day comes, there will be a lot of people alive. And those people, according to Paul's writing, will, the ones that are Christians will, in an instant, in the twinkle of an eye, will be changed from corruptible to incorruption, from mortality to immortality.
And that would be essential doctrine too, right?
Yeah, well.
Because I think if you don't believe that there's going to be a resurrection of the dead, you're really not a Christian. So you have to believe that. You have to believe that. To me, that's you're something else. You're not a Christian.
And Daniel is one of those. He went to his rest.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just interesting. I'm just pointing out that it's.
Yeah. Boy, I love.
There's so many different things that people trying to speculate what these things mean, and like you said, the more it's hard to say. You know, some people look at that 1290 number, and then they try to equate that to the Book of Revelation. Well, those numbers don't match any of the numbers in the Book of Revelation.
Yeah.
Those numbers are different, and some people tried to take those as years, the day-year theory. And they would say 1290 years. Well, we've already went past the 1290 years. And we've already went past all those from the time of Christ. So if you put those somewhere in the future, which most people do, they put that in the future. This is something that's still going to happen. Well, there's no indication of that. But it could be. I'm not saying it's not. I just don't see that. To me, the two numbers don't make sense to each other.
All this is, or what this is Daniel writing down his dream. And do your dreams make sense? Mine rarely do.
Some do, and some more than others.
Yeah.
On that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
But it takes me a long time to interpret them. I spend a lot of time. I spend hours on them.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that there's been a lot of speculation, like you said, through the years, what chapter 12 is about. And especially the end of it. It's very difficult, and you just see a lot of different people trying to put things in there. But to really equate that to anything, there's nothing else, at least that I've ever found in the Bible, that equates directly to it. Because you could say the time times and half a time, but then he's talking about something completely different at the end there with the 1290 and the 1335, whatever.
Yeah.
So he's talking about two different numbers.
Well, in my dreams, for instance, other than in the Bible and Scripture, the most time in my life that I've ever spent doing anything else is hanging around a golf course. So I dream a lot about golf, and they're funny and stupid kind of dreams, like where a hole will go under a freeway and come up the other side. And that never, to my knowledge, ever gonna happen. I don't know what caused me to dream that kind of thing. But anyway, dreams are funny. Let's pray. Lord, we're thankful for your goodness to us, your mercy to us, your blessings on us. We're thankful for the word that you've left to us, the opportunity to speculate about what it is that you meant, and to be able to compare one portion of your word with another portion of your word and try to arrive at some conclusion. And we're thankful for that. We worship you. We thank you. We've come here today to learn about you in the name of Jesus of Nazareth, who indeed is the Son of God. Amen.
Amen.